Penguin Random House Audio presents The Judge's List by John Grisham. Read for you by Mary-Louise Parker, with an introduction read by the author.
Hi, I'm John Grisham, and welcome to the audio edition of my latest novel, The Judge's List. I'm not calling it a sequel because sequels usually deal with a continuation of a previous story. Rather, it is another adventure in the life and career of one of my favorite characters, Lacy Stoltz. You met Lacy a few years back in a book called The Whistler. At that time, she was a 35-year-old lawyer, single, attractive, pretty cool and hip. In fact, I've always had a crush on Lacy. In The Whistler, she was working for the Florida Board on Judicial Conduct. Her job was to investigate complaints involving allegations of misconduct by judges in Florida. In one of her investigations, she uncovered a breathtaking scheme of corruption by a crime syndicate with massive payoffs to an elected sitting judge. Lacy put the criminals away, but not before they almost killed her. Since then, I've wanted to bring her back, but I could not create a story as big and sensational as The Whistler. Until now. In The Judge's List, Lacy is confronted by a mysterious woman who claims that a circuit court judge in Pensacola is responsible for a long-running series of murders, a serial killer who also happens to wear a black robe. The woman knows her stuff because, as she claims, the judge murdered her father 20 years earlier, and she has been on the killer's trail ever since. Lacy has never dealt with such a serious allegation. In fact, after some initial research, she realizes that in the history of American law, a sitting judge has never been accused of murder. That is about to change. At first, Lacy is reluctant to get involved. Her job does not include investigating violent crimes. That's for the state police and the FBI, professionals who carry guns. But her job requires her to open a file and start asking questions. Before long, she realizes that to survive, it is imperative that she keep her name off the judge's list. Enjoy the book.
1. The call came through the office landline, through a system that was at least 20 years old and had fought off all technological advances. It was taken by a tattooed receptionist named Felicity, a new girl who would be gone before she fully understood the phones. They were all leaving, it seemed, especially the clerical help. Turnover was ridiculous. Morale was low. The Board on Judicial Conduct had just seen its budget chopped for the 4th straight year by a legislature that hardly knew it existed. Felicity managed to route the call down the hall to the cluttered desk of Lacy Stoltz. "There's a call on line 3, she announced. "Who is it?" Lacy asked. She wouldn't say. There were so many ways to respond. At that moment, though, Lacy was bored, and she did not wish to waste the emotional energy necessary to properly chastise the kid and set her straight. Routines and protocols were crumbling. Office discipline was waning as BJC spiraled into a leaderless mess. As a veteran, the veteran, it was important to set an example. "Thanks," she said, and punched the blinking light. "Lacy Stoltz." "Good afternoon, Miss Stoltz. Do you have a moment?" Female, educated, no hint of an accent, mid-40s, give or take 3 years. Lacy always played the voice game. "And to whom do I have the pleasure?" "My name is Margie for now, but I use other ones." Lacy was amused and almost chuckled. "Well, at least you're upfront about it. It normally takes me some time to work through the aliases. Anonymous callers were routine. People with gripes about judges were always cautious and hesitant to come forward and take on the system. Almost all feared retaliation from the powers on high. Margie said, "I'd like to talk to you, somewhere private." "My office is private if you'd like." "Oh, no," she snapped, apparently frightened at the thought. "That won't work." "You know the Seiler building next door?" "Of course," Lacy said as she stood and looked out her window at the Seiler building, one of several nondescript government addresses in downtown Tallahassee. Margie said, "There's a coffee bar on the ground floor. Can we meet there?" "I suppose. When?" "Now. I'm on my second latte." "Slow down. Give me a few minutes. And you'll recognize me?" "Yes, you're on the website. I'm in the rear, left side." Lacy's office was indeed private. The one to her left was empty, vacated by an ex-colleague who'd moved on to a bigger agency. Across the hall, an office had been converted into a makeshift storage closet. She walked toward Felicity and ducked into the office of Darren Trope, a 2-year man already prowling for another job. "You busy?" she asked as she interrupted whatever he was doing. "Not really." It didn't matter what he was or was not doing. If Lacy needed anything, Darren belonged to her. "Need a favor. I'm stepping over to Seiler to meet a stranger who just admitted that she is using a fake name." Oh, I love the cloak and dagger. Sure beats sitting here reading about some judge who made lewd comments to a witness. "How lewd?" "Pretty graphic." "Any photos? Videos?" "Not yet." "Let me know if you get them." "So, mind stepping over in 15 minutes and taking a picture?" "Sure, no problem. No idea who she is?" "None whatsoever." Lacy left the building, took her time walking around the block, enjoyed a moment of cool air, and strolled into the lobby of the Seiler building. It was almost 4 p.m., and there were no other customers drinking coffee at that hour. Margie was at a small table in the rear to the left. She waved quickly as though someone might notice and she didn't want to get caught. Lacy smiled and walked toward her. African-American, mid-40s, professional, attractive, educated, slacks and heels, and dressed nicer than Lacy, though around BJC these days any and all attire was allowed. The old boss wanted coats and ties and hated jeans, but he had retired 2 years ago and took most of the rules with him. Lacy passed the counter where the barista was loafing with both elbows stuck on the formica, hands cradling her pink phone that had her thoroughly fascinated. She did not look up, never thought about greeting a customer, and Lacy decided to pass on more caffeine anyway. Without standing, Margie stuck out a hand and said, "Nice to meet you. Would you like some coffee?" Lacy smiled, shook her hand, and sat across the square table. "No thanks. And it's Margie, right?" "For now." "Okay, we're off to a bad start. Why are you using an alias?" "My story will take hours to tell, and I'm not sure you want to hear it." "Then why bother?" "Please, Miss Stoltz." "Lacy." "Please, Lacy. You have no idea the emotional trauma I've been through trying to get to this point in my life. I'm a wreck right now, okay?" She seemed fine, though a bit on edge. Perhaps it was the second latte. Her eyes darted right and left. They were pretty and surrounded by large purple frames. The lenses were probably not needed. The glasses were part of the outfit, a subtle disguise. Lacy said, "I'm not sure what to say. Why don't you start talking and maybe we'll get somewhere?" "I've read about you." She reached down into a backpack and deftly pulled out a file.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?